Wages, inflation, and a 3,000% price hike in white bread since 1939. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. The website in2013dollars.com reports this. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, prices for white bread are 3,186.70% higher in 2025 versus 1939. That's a $58.64 difference in value. What the heck? That seems significant, yes? The current national average price is $1.84 for bread, white, pan per pound. That's how they term it, pan per pound. This data is collected by a national survey and can vary from region to region. Between 1939 and 2025, white bread experienced an inflation average rate of 4.14% per year. This rate of change indicates significant inflation. In other words, white bread costing $1.84 in the year 1939 would cost $60.48 in 2025 for an equivalent purchase. What the heck is going on? I thought this economy was so great. I thought Joe Biden ushered in this great economy after Trump supposedly killed it, after Barack Obama steamrolled it ahead, right? Isn't that what the mainstream media wants us to believe? And do you remember, by the way, Joe Biden's White House economic experts trying to sell us that the idea of high inflation was actually a sign of a good economy? Remember that? Because things got so desperate under Joe Biden that they had to trot out their leading propagandist guy, and that's what he came up with. High inflation, it's actually a sign of a positive economy. Before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. At Real Life Network, that's the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. If you haven't noticed, each week I'm getting better at this, right? Each Bold and Blunt episode, I'm getting better at saying Calvary. I guess the more I think about it, the worse I get. But Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. It's just starting to roll off the tongue. By the end of this year, I swear, it's not even going to be a tongue twister any longer. It'll just flow. But anyhow, you can get Bold and Blunt there at Real Life Network. And as I've mentioned in the last couple episodes, I have a big news announcement to make about Bold and Blunt and Real Life Network. Bold and Blunt, the podcast, the audio version, has been part of RLN for a while now, a couple years, I believe, and been very blessed to have Bold and Blunt included among the great lineup of hosts they have over there. But more coming, more coming, expansion coming, and good news coming, and Bold and Blunt listeners want to stay tuned for that. You may also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com. But you knew that, didn't you? Because you listen to all my episodes. So you know what I'm about to say. As a matter of fact, I could just take a moment of silence and you guys could just fill in the blank here, right? But maybe there's a new listener out there. So let me quickly mention WashingtonTimes.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page. Click on the newsletter section. And voila, you will be taken to a whole new universe of the Washington Times called the newsletter section, the newsletter page. And I think it's, the second or third line down, you will see Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. Click on that one. Subscribe to it. All you have to do is enter your email address. You can click on the others and subscribe to the others as well. Great products there at Washington Times. I work with some of the best in the industry. But definitely click on Bold and Blunt. Enter your email address. And why? Why? Because great things will happen then. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right to your email box, will be delivered Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley, the newsletter. And what is this newsletter? Let me tell you, it contains all the commentaries that I write at Washington Times every day. More than every day, twice a day, sometimes multiple times a day when I get going, right? I've knocked out several commentaries in a single day on previous occasions when really things have been just rolling off my mind. Usually during Barack Obama's days when it was so easy to find something to write about because, geez, every which way you looked under Barack Obama, he was doing something that violated the Constitution, that just, damaged America, destroyed freedom, not to mention all the anti-Christian policies and agendas that he pushed. Easter worshipers, remember that one? Anyhow, what was I saying again? Oh, yeah. You subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. You'll get my commentaries delivered right to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's like clockwork. They're like robots at the Washington Times, just churning out the newsletters and getting them to your email box because we care so much about this country. We want you to read the very best news in the business, which is, hey, Washington Times. What can I say? So it'll be delivered to your email box, and you will get my commentaries as well as my Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcast delivered right to your email. But you don't even have to get up. You don't even have to get up. If you keep your laptop by your bed, you don't even have to get out of bed, right? Just open your laptop and go to your email box, and boom, there I am, right there, right in your bedroom with you. Anything better than that? You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. All right, let's get back to the economy and stagnating wages and what is going on here. You know, common sense will tell you when you open the borders wide to illegals, what happens is the illegals come in, the companies that want to save money hire them, like construction companies. That's why there was a report a couple years ago, and it's been pretty consistent really through the years, that roughly 23% of construction employees are illegals, right? They're illegals. And yet, how many prosecutions go forth against these companies? I don't know. I'm going to take a wild guess, a Wild West guess, and say none. Right? Because you would hear about it. You just don't hear about companies having to pay the consequences of hiring illegals. Why? Because companies have some really good lobbyists in D.C. You know, that whole U.S. Chamber of Commerce thing, right? U.S. Chamber of Commerce, pro-business, represents business interests on Capitol Hill to our politicians. Well, part and parcel of their pro-business agenda has always been open the borders wider, as wide as they can get. They don't say it that way. They talk about necessary workers, essential workers, that American citizens won't do these jobs, and so we need to bring in illegals. Well, here's a thought. You know why American citizens don't want to do a lot of the jobs that are filled by illegals? Because the companies don't pay well. And why don't they pay well? Because they can pay illegal immigrants, citizens. They can pay illegal aliens more than what they would have to pay American citizens. So it's this cycle that's created at root. Let's just call it what it is. It's created by greed, right? This is not free market capitalism. This is free market capitalism run amok, right? With a little demonic influence there, stoking the seeds of greed. I don't know if that metaphor works, but growing the seeds, spreading the seeds of greed among companies and business owners. And you know what? You can probably make a case as a business owner that the more regulations that Democrats, because look, it is Democrats that are regulation crazy, the more Democrats push regulatory controls onto businesses, including the radical environmental stuff that Democrats are famous for, the higher costs businesses bear in order to comply. And so then their payroll has to withstand some cuts in order to keep their businesses going, so they welcome in illegals. So look, all roads that lead down a wrong path lead to Democrats. I'm just saying, you can make a case that Democrats are the problem. Get rid of Democrats in America, and everybody would be happier. Democrats don't want to go, though. The border swings both ways, but they don't want to go. They would much rather import illegals here to destroy the nation and then turn around and complain that Republicans are destroying the nation than they would just packing a bag and leaving, right? So as I was saying, illegals, you can make it a case that hiring illegals have really depressed wages through the years. And as a matter of fact, some very fine economists have indeed made that case. Of course, the left pushes back against that because to acknowledge that would get in the way of their open border dreams and fantasies, right? And speaking of fantasies, isn't it funny that, you know, when conservatives fantasize about something, they fantasize about like freedom, or they fantasize about family and holidays and magical getaways and ocean cruises and visits to faraway lands and beautiful artwork and things like that. And when Democrats fantasize, the Democrats not only fantasize about open borders and letting in the dregs of society, right? The savages and the thugs and the murderers and the gangbangers and the cartels and the human traffickers, but they dream about killing Republicans, right? Looking in Virginia, right? In my own state of Virginia, Jay Jones running around fantasizing about murdering Republicans. Why? Because they're Republicans. Democrats hate Republicans. They hate them so much they want to murder them. And they want to murder them so badly, that's what they fantasize about. It's just a slight difference, right? Republicans fantasize about all that is good. Democrats fantasize about doing evil deeds. So, you know, potatoes, however you look at it. But the fact is, as I was saying, some very fine economists have indeed pointed to the very common sense fact that if you open the doors of our borders to illegals, and then businesses hire these illegals, they pay them in wages that are much lower than what they would have to pay the skilled craftsmen in America for some of these construction jobs and blue-collar jobs and other jobs, middle-class jobs, right? And so then that makes it that the wage that itself has become almost permanently depressed, right? I mean, how many of you have had employers come up to you in the middle of a workday and say, you know what? I was home last night thinking, and I was sitting on my couch, and I was eating my Doritos and watching TV, and it just dawns on me, you know what? I got to give you a raise, right? And not just any old raise. I got to give you a 60, 70% raise in order to balance out the inflation gap, right? The gap that has separated wages and inflation since the late 1970s. How many of you have ever experienced that? I haven't. Add it to your dream list, right? Because Republicans, as I said, we fantasize about things that are like good, that bring about good, that foster good. And counted among that, could be pay raises that help you live independently. Democrats, on the other hand, dream about food stamps and expansions in WIC. And this is why Democrats are so upset with President Trump right now, because they think he's taking away their WIC. They're taking away their freebies, which isn't free, right? Taxpayer funded. You and me are paying for all this to go to illegals, by the way, along with the health care benefits that Democrats deny are given to illegals, that taxpayers pay for illegals. Different podcast, different day. There's something else I wanted to read here, and it's from CBS News in August 2025, August 18th, if you're taking notes, and I know some of you out there might be taking notes. So yes, August 18th, 2025, put it in the notebook. Headline, wages aren't keeping up with inflation, with some jobs falling further behind than others. Thank you, CBS, for telling us what we all know. Let me read a little bit from this. Wages still haven't caught up with inflation 4 years after the pandemic caused prices to soar. I'm going to take a little bit of umbrage with that statement, and I'll circle back on that in a second. 4 years after the pandemic caused prices to soar and created a cost of living crisis for many households, a new study finds. Wages still haven't caught up with inflation, okay? Not disputing that. So true. It's been that way since about 1979, at least according to my research. That's what I found for if you want to pinpoint a date, okay? Wages have really, the gap between wages and inflation has really widened since the late 1970s. But 4 years after the here we go. Pandemic caused prices to soar and created a cost of living crisis. Really? COVID did that? So COVID sent people to the hospital. COVID caused breathing problems. And COVID also went into the stores and made prices soar. That is a crazy, creative little virus. No wonder Anthony Fauci wanted you to get 18 shots and wear 47 face masks. He had to control the prices. That stupid little COVID virus running around changing prices on the tickets at stores. See, that's the thing. It was government shutdown of everything. It was Joe Biden coming into office and just shutting everything down, right? And let's not forget, I want to be fair here. President Trump did shut down, right? He said 2 weeks to reopen. And then it was shortly after that he reopened everything and he left it for the states to decide. And then Anthony Fauci went around and did a big media tour talking about any state that reopened, people would die, people would die, people would die. He didn't put it quite so bluntly. What he did was he went out there and his best science, his best medical opinion was that if states reopen, there was potentially, maybe, perhaps a risk that people might end up in the hospital, or some people potentially, perhaps, could, maybe, die. And then he stepped back, wiped his hands, went like this. That's the sound of my hands wiping. And then waited for the media parrots, to go out there and say, Governor Ron DeSantis, Anthony Fauci said people will die if you open up everything in your state. Governor Kristi Noem, how can you keep your state open? Which, by the way, Kristi Noem, not Governor DeSantis, was the only one who didn't shut down, okay? So let's put the heroics where they belong. And in this case, on the heroine, not the hero, okay? Kristi Noem was the one who didn't shut down in South Dakota. Governor DeSantis had to reopen, and he reopened earlier than some other states. But it was Kristi Noem who never shut down. So Anthony Fauci wiped his hands. Remember what I said that sound was? The sound of wiping hands. Step back and let the media run its course, right? Let the parrots and the pundits who pay for the Democrat politicians to stay in office, let them take his best scientific statements and bullet point them, and make little concise sound bites that went like this. Anthony Fauci said if you open your state, then people are going to die, right? And that's what happened. And each time Anthony Fauci went out there and did that. He did that the whole time of COVID. And the fact that, even those who should know better, like Fox News at the time, didn't call him out for it, despicable. So back to the statement. 4 years after the pandemic caused prices to soar and created a cost of living crisis. No, it wasn't the pandemic. It was politicians. And specifically, it was leftist politicians. And to put in even more specific on it, it was Democrats. Because, as I said, Trump shut down for a little while, but Joe Biden just went total tyrant. I mean, he just got a taste of it and he couldn't stop it. Well, he couldn't stop it because he was a puppet, right? But the players who were pushing behind him didn't want to stop it. They were loving the state of tyranny that COVID gave them, and they desired to exercise it to full dictatorial extent. Remember Whitmer? Remember Governor Whitmer, no seeds, don't buy seeds and all that, and then coming out and denying it and saying, well, I never made a rule that you couldn't buy seeds. And yet all the Home Depots in the area had those little yellow ticker taper tapes cordoned off their seed section like it was a scene of a murder. Do not enter, right? They had all the yellow tape so you couldn't even buy seeds, and that came from somewhere, the governor's office. Anyhow, the pandemic caused prices to soar and created a cost of living crisis. Okay, so there were financial repercussions from COVID, but it was due to Democrat policies. It was due to Democrats waxing their dictatorial muscles and trying to shut down freedom in America and destroy the Constitution. And there is a problem now. There is a problem. People nowadays, working their butts off, one job, two job, three jobs more, right? Dr. Seuss, right? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Well, there are people with one job, two jobs, three jobs more right now who can't afford to buy a home. Why is that? Well, my guest today has some really good insights into that. He's written a book about it, but he's here to talk in broader terms about what's going on in this current economy. And, if you're a young person out there, when can you buy a home, right? Maybe that's on your dream list. And if it is, we know that's to tell you're a Republican, because if you were a Democrat, you'd be saying, when is HUD going to buy me a home? When is the government going to pay for my home and my child care, and when am I going to get my free food? That's your dream, that's your fantasy. But if you're a young person out there who's dreaming about buying a home someday, well, first off, we know you're a Republican, and second off, listen in, because Paul Stone is my guest today, and he has some advice on what to do and how to handle this economy going forward. Paul, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. So great to have you here.
Oh, I'm extraordinarily grateful to be here, and I love the title, and I love your show.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Now, I'm really happy to have you here. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because it seems so timely with the backdrop of the continuing resolution and the budget the government shutdown and all that. But I want to speak first to this very interesting piece you wrote. I think it was in Fox News, and you talked about why your parents could afford to buy a home on one income, but nowadays, even a two-income family can barely afford to buy a house. What is going on?
It's the cost of living increases. So if you've thought of, football field, football's in season right now, or, basketball court, soccer field, the goal is to get down the field. So if life is advancing you into your 20s, 30s, 40s, you expect to pass certain down and distances or certain, milestone markers along the way. And owning a home is out there in the end zone, having kids, certain things you want to accomplish in your career. Maybe you're going to get a master's degree, or maybe you're actually going to finish, college at night. So we have these goals as we get older. And a big piece of us reaching those goals is the vision that we witness others hitting those goals. So as we're, going down the road and seeing what our parents accomplished, see what our grandparents accomplished, the government, as it prints money, it moves the end zone out of reach. Now, what could keep up with that same pace of lengthening the field, if you will, would be your earnings rising at the same speed upon which they're distancing or elongating the field. If they're moving the end zone further and further and further away from where you stand right now, you wouldn't feel that if your earnings grew with you. So since 2010, the cost of living, commodity prices, has grown by 400%. Wages have grown by 80%. That is evil. It is evil for the government to continue to pay its bills while causing hell on earth for anyone, that's just kind of in a salaried job today and can't force their boss to give them 15% raises every year.
So let me just play devil's advocate for a little bit. every generation as you grow older, right? You have a tendency to look back and say things like, well, when I was young, this cost this much. Or, candy bars used to be a mile long when I was young, and now they're the size of a postage stamp, and you pay more,
Yeah.
things like that. So how
Yes.
much of what you describe is just sort of a blip that naturally smooths out, and how much of it is just, as you pointed out, just evil government intervention?
All of it is evil government intervention. And so here's where we would cause ourselves inflation as the entire workforce is no longer sitting on the couch, they're at work. So the economy is now getting all of these, these payrolls, spending money in the economy it's not used to. And so when you look at interest rate policy in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you see rates generally pace around 5 or 6%. When so let's just say last year was the last year of a bust. And so now we're heading into the first year of growth and expansion. Unemployment might be 15%. Next year it might be 12. The year after that it's 9. The year after that it's 6. Eventually it's down to a low number. So what's happening? Well, the economy is experiencing more and more money being spent in it. So that's normal inflation that we're causing because all of us are off the couch and back to work. And the Fed would raise rates. And raising rates causes the companies to see their revenue go down. So now what do? They shed workforce. They let go of employees. They send a lot of us back to sitting on the couch. And so now we're not overheating our economy with all those payrolls, spending money in the economy's not used to. That's not what we're experiencing. So in 1971, Nixon caused the ability for the Fed to create money out of thin air and just generate all of the spending it wants for whatever programs it decides, and it no longer needs to check in with us. And that is an ongoing crisis because as they print, they cause their own costs to go higher next year. So they have to print more next year to cover the increasing in costs for what they had to print the year before. It isn't a blip. It's constant. And it is why society can't figure out what the hell is agitating it. Because when it was the crappy king, the warring king, the drought, the flood, the plague, those were all temporary. And we could all understand what was causing our life to be difficult in certain ways. No one gets this. That's why it's so revolutionary to buy this book and understand the war on drugs, death of the American family, marriages in general, challenges to minorities in this country, and the challenge to our youth and why they're struggling mightily in ways that we don't understand or never seen before is literally because the government causes the cost of living rising faster than your wages.
And let me give you the title of your book really quickly and then go back to a point that you made that I think is crucial. Your book is 1971, How All of Society's Problems Can Be Traced to a Singular Day in History. And I want to go back to the reference you made about Nixon because you're talking about when he removed us from the gold standard, right? And we went to a fiat currency system. And, that is just another way of saying imaginary money, right? Because you move off of something real, tangible that you can hold in your hand, gold, and then you allow the government to basically create money out of thin air, which Barack Obama did several times, didn't he?
Oh, every president has had to, and it's not even them, really. It's just the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. The government gets presented with these bills it doesn't have the money to pay, so it calls the Treasury, hey, we need $2 trillion, and they hook up with the Fed and they write a bond, and then all of this happens, and now the money exists, even though it's just like commas and zeros entered on an Excel spreadsheet.
So this system, though, there are only a handful of people out there who are calling for a return to the gold system, to the gold standard, right? Both Ron Paul and Rand Paul are two of them. So the solution here is what? Because now we're moving into a new world, right, where the money is even more imaginary. We're talking about cryptocurrencies, and we're talking about just removing people off of paper money in the end.
Yeah. We could talk about solutions, but the first thing I love to focus on, and it's It's the secondary thing the government has murdered, and it's central banks all around the world, central governments everywhere. Where is a country throwing parades for its government every time there's a seasonal change from spring to summer, summer to fall, fall to winter? Where is that country where the citizens are so stoked about how their government's been treating them? They're throwing government personnel a parade every 90 days. It's not happening. So it is the world has created, our global government, central governments have now created $303 trillion in money out of thin air to pay its country's bills since in the last 25 years. 303 trillion. So if you said, oh my God, that is abject failure, let's recognize what else the government has done to us. And that is they have come in between us. They divide us. They break down the one glue, the super glue that causes humans to bond. And that is problem solving. They are creating problems you and I can't get together and solve. So when we say things like Ron Paul, gold standard, let's return to that. Could that edict ever land in Washington to cause them to say, let's do that? No. So our votes aren't going to fix this problem. So the book, the greatest delivery that the book offers the reader is the awareness that it is up to you. It is up to individually the 350 million of us that live here, call it 70% of that are struggling. That we recognize life's happening where our feet are. And the anger and all the rage and the name calling and blaming and shaming that we do, both sides does against the other, is literally a waste of our time here. It is literally a waste of our energy, and it distracts us from enjoying our life. All of life, all of the story of humanity has been saddled with unfairness, curveballs, the bridge is out, you got bad luck. We have to overcome challenges here. That is the time spent on Earth. We will never engineer a system where those challenges don't appear anymore. So how do we deal with this one? And one of the things I just used to draw people's attention, they don't have to think I'm recommending it, I'm just pointing it out, to draw attention away from what you might think. Because see, when we think the government can be fixing the problem, it can't. Since they're the creators of it, we have to move ourselves around this problem so we can enjoy our life until that government goes broke, because mathematically that's what happens. The dollar today is only worth 3 cents. Tennessee happens to have the strongest income to cost of living ratio in the country. Now, some people say, I'm not moving. Well, a lot of people moved away from Europe, crossing the Atlantic on wooden ships that took 2 months for the trip to end, and come to a place where there was nothing. And 7 out of 10 of those colonists would lose their life making the journey or once they got here. So how hard would it be to leave the city? And yes, everything we're used to, if we can just borrow Chapman's fast car and get out of our routines and everything we're stuck in,
I'm sick
and
of that
end
song.
up in Tennessee where I would be happy because whatever it is I'm doing, the pay I'm getting, and maybe we could work remote, is a lot more than my cost of living. And there's 3 pretty good-sized cities in Tennessee. There's Nashville, Knoxville, and Memphis. So if we lived in the burbs from those towns, we could find the work that would pay us more than enough to overwhelm our bills, and we would have the peace of mind the government has been killing worse every decade since 1971. And that's what I call evil. None of us has to be here, so don't some government force be interrupting my pursuit of happiness while I'm here. That's evil, and it isn't going to stop, so we have to fix it individually. And down the road, there can be a solution. But right now, the book makes you aware that you can be responsible for adjusting your life and find peace of mind here, even though the government won't stop printing.
So really quickly, 3 points. First off, I am so sick of that Tracy Chapman song, right? Okay, so yeah, and then somebody made a remake of it. I think a country singer, right? So
Yeah, he did.
yeah, and second off, there were tons of people who fled New York during and after COVID, and where did they go? They went to Tennessee.
Florida.
Well, they did go to Florida, right? And Florida's having its problem with its insurers right now, so people are fleeing Florida, but a lot of them went to Tennessee. And thirdly, the question, so what is Tennessee doing differently that the rest of the states could immediately implement or adopt?
That's a beautiful question. So economics, and I take a farmer's approach to economics. I'm not a trained economist. And that's maybe how I see this, because everyone else is just going to keep drinking the Kool-Aid of, yes, mathematically, we could print $100 billion trillion. Excel, how many commas does Excel limit out at? None, right? So just keep adding the commas and the money's. But eventually, it literally wouldn't be worth, and soon, from what the economists say that are paying attention to this, around the corner, it literally wouldn't be worth the human energy you would expend to take a knee and pick up $100 bill off the sidewalk. Because the application of that $100 bill, what you could use it for, is meaningless. That's around the corner. That's math. We are not the masters of math. So I don't know why Arkansas and Tennessee necessarily have this great ratio. I don't know that they're doing anything except for, this is my one thing I focus in on, the voter itself and how they honor principles and truths could be that they just aren't a state that looks for handouts from Washington. That they've engineered a personnel file, if you will, a persona, a mindset in that state, those states, where they just think, I don't need the excesses. I need happiness. They're humble states, maybe they're humble states, not like New York, California, or, states that make a lot of noise. Because if you Google a moon, astronaut driving a moon buggy on the moon, and you'll laugh and go, oh, it looks so funny. Just recognize that's what you're doing the next time you get into your vehicle. You're literally driving a vehicle on a planet. It is that magical, crazy, wonderful, and you can't keep missing what this shot, your 80 years here, can be packed full of. And let's focus more on the living in the years we get, rather than packing all of the years we could possibly fit into the living. Let's enjoy our time here.
Well, you're definitely on to something, and you definitely have my attention when you say you can't rely on the government to fix the problem the government itself created. I think that's a rule to live by. And your book sounds fascinating. 1971, how all of society's problems can be traced to a singular day in history. I'm a little bit concerned that might hand those whiny Gen Zers an opportunity to say, see, we're not wrong. We really are the victim. But, hopefully with optimism here, they'll learn from it and grow from it and not use it to promote victimhood. But it's been a fascinating chat with you, Paul. So happy that you could take time to be on Bold and Blunt. Paul Stone, thank you so much.
Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. And meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt.